Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Last time we took a look at Nikon's new 70-200, and while that lens was exciting, it doesn't bring anything particularly new to the table. This 105mm though is the greatest portrait lens that Nikon has ever made. So if you don't watch the rest of the video, I can tell you that that is the case. Let's go ahead and take a closer look and find out why. So on the 70-200 2.8, you guys were asking me a lot of questions about it, and I was glad I was able to answer lots of those. I later tried the lens hood from the new 70-200 on the old one, and it does fit fine. It doesn't vignette or anything, so that's cool. A lot of people ask me about samples and so forth. The deal is this. Basically, that lens doesn't bring anything new and exciting to the table except for the lack of focus breathing and a few other things that I already showed in the video. In terms of the images, I really couldn't see much of a difference between the current lens or the new lens and the old one. So yeah, I feel like there was a lot of other exciting things to talk about other than showing a bunch of arbitrary samples. On this lens, however, guys, I will have a lot of samples to show you. Because as I mentioned, this lens brings something entirely new to the table. I don't really think that Nikon has anything that this compares to from the past. Yes, there is the 105mm f2DC, but that lens is so old at this point. It's the only similarity really is this focal length. I mean, this one is so much different. This lens reminds me a lot of the Sigma Art Series lenses in a lot of ways, as far as its maximum sharpness when shooting wide open. As you can see, this is a pretty good sized lens. It has a 82mm filter size. Now, the thing that I think is kind of funny is that Sigma's new 85 1.4 Art Series is actually a larger lens than this 105 Nikkor. And I actually prefer this one. Perhaps in a future video, whenever I get both lenses in the same place at the same time, I would do a little bit of a comparison. On this lens, it is also a E-type lens, so it has the electronic diaphragm like a lot of other Nikon lenses we've looked at recently. Of course, it's nanocrystal coated, which helps out a lot if you know, with this very, very large front element. It will help reduce flare and ghosting and that sort of thing. Now, the one thing I'll tell you guys, well, actually, before I get to that, look at the back of this. Of course, it does have a nice sill there, and look at that, man. My God, that's a huge opening there. It kind of reminds me of looking at a Canon 85mm 1.2. It's actually what this lens reminds me of most. Yeah, really big opening there. It's nice to see something like this in Nikon's range. Pretty cool. Now, oh yes, onto that downside I was speaking of. You'll notice over here on the side we have our usual manual focus, autofocus, and then our manual setting. So really not a whole lot to see on this lens. I do wish that we saw VR on this lens, though. That's the only thing. I think that this lens, with it being 105mm, I did have to be very careful with it in terms of getting good focus. I got a lot of really good shots at a further distance, but shooting a close headshot, really I shouldn't have been shooting that at f2. Anyways, but yeah, the combination of long focal length and wide aperture and close subject distance meant that I had practically no depth of field. So this is something that you'll have to adapt to. I definitely found it easier to adapt whenever I was shooting like half-length shots and full-length shots at a distance and that sort of thing. But this isn't really the lens's fault. This is just the inherent nature of using such a telephoto, ultra-fast lens like this. You just get razor blade thin depth of field. It would have been nice to see some VR on this lens. I mean, I do understand why it doesn't have VR. I would imagine that this lens is no small engineering feat. I'm not an optical engineer, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. But yeah, I can imagine that having a lens that's designed this way have VR as well would have added an additional challenge. But yeah, it would have been nice to see it just because at 105 millimeters, I definitely had to bump up the shutter speed quite a bit to avoid handshake. Of course, your mileage may vary there. You may be more steady than me or less steady than me, but this is something to keep in mind. It's not really a big issue for me since I do typically use lots of flash, but definitely that is something to keep a lookout for whenever you're shooting with it. This lens, I don't know, I kind of prefer the color of a lot of the Nikon lenses to some of the Sigma ones. And in shooting with that 85, briefly, that new Sigma 85 1.4 Art Series, it reminds me of the old one in terms of its color. It's very, very warm in color. And I don't know, I'm going to have to do a little side-by-side comparison. And this is where I would show you guys lots of samples. But I'll have to do a little side-by-side comparison and see how that lens compares to my 35 and my 50 Art Series lenses. But I swear those lenses don't seem to be as warm. They seem to be much more neutral, but the 85 is very warm. I definitely prefer the color from this Nikon. There's not a whole lot to say about this lens. It's very understated in its appearance, and its construction. It does have Nikon's fluorine lens coating, not to be confused with a fluorite lens element. Basically, that coating is on the front of the lens to help it repel fingerprints and that sort of thing. I'm kind of clumsy, so honestly, I would put a filter on this one, especially with it being such a large piece of glass. Anyways, guys, pretty unique lens. I have loads of samples to show you in the comments. And let me know what you'd like to see me compare this lens to in the future. I am definitely thinking that we're going to have to compare this to that new 85 1.4 Art Series whenever I can get this one and that one in the same place at the same time. But tell me what else you'd like to see this compared to. Yeah, I'd be very, very, very eager to hear that, and we can see what we can do on that. If you guys want to see more of what I do with the camera, definitely go and check out my page on Instagram or Facebook, which is at PhotogJTheGreat. My usual very modest internet handle. Also, if you would like to purchase this lens, take a look at the link in the description below. Purchasing the lens from that link will definitely help me continue to bring you guys more videos. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.